My Platinum Trophy collection spans over 160 Platinum Trophies, but there are a handful of them that I'd never attempt again. Here are just a few. The first game we have here is The Quarry. Now this is an excellent game, make no mistake about it, but if I had to do the Platinum all over again, I'd probably just pass, I wouldn't do it. I went into this game completely blind and I had a great time with it, and honestly it holds up right next to Until Dawn. I think I prefer Until Dawn a little bit more, but The Quarry is still really solid overall. But after completing the game and looking up a guide to get 100% completion, it made me realize I needed to play this game at least a few more times. Not only can you not get every collectible in one playthrough, you actually have to do 2 playthroughs just to get all of the tarot cards and all of the clues, but you also need specific playthroughs to infect all the main characters. And at launch there was one trophy that was bugged and completely broken, resulting in players, including myself, needing to replay the entire game start to finish just to see if the trophy would pop, which it didn't. Now, this is by far not a difficult Platinum at all, but it became very, very tedious since you can't skip any of the cutscenes or dialogue sequences. You basically have to watch the same sequences with the same dialogue over and over and over again, and for me, I had to play the game 6 times start to finish. And with each playthrough ranging anywhere between, 6 to 10 hours, it became very tedious very fast. And apparently I had it easy compared to everybody else. I saw some comments online stating that I had to play the game more than 6 times. So this is, again, not a hard trophy list, but by the end of it all, it wore on me. And for that reason, I probably wouldn't platinum this game again. It just became too tedious and monotonous. But again, this is a great game, so much to really appreciate here, including the voice acting, the visuals, the music, everything about this game is so solidly constructed. But if you're going for the trophy list, just make sure you follow a guide from the beginning so you don't have to play the game multiple times over. Next up here is the incredible Hades. Now this is a new addition to my trophy collection, and man, what an incredible game Hades is. From its writing, its characters, its fun and challenging gameplay, Hades is by far the best roguelike you can play. It's so much fun, and the gameplay loop and the overall loop itself fits within the narrative of the game, and there's a lot of a narrative, let me tell you that. And it really is unlike any other roguelike that I've played personally. There's so many story events, so many story sequences and dialogue for unique characters, I just couldn't get enough of Hades. But the reason I wouldn't get the platinum in Hades a second time is just due to the amount of grinding involved for certain dialogue and items to unlock in the game. It's not nearly as bad as something like Returnal or Enter the Gungeon, which we'll see later on, but all these roguelike games are just an absolute pain when it comes to achievement and trophy hunting in general. By far the most annoying trophy for me was the Divided by Death trophy. For this trophy, you have to complete a quest line that can only be completed by talking to an NPC character in the 3rd region of the game who randomly appears on your runs. So not only do you have to beat the first 2 bosses multiple times in order to get to the 3rd region multiple times, but you also have to hope and pray that this NPC character shows up in that 3rd region of the game and that a specific dialogue sequence is triggered in order to progress his quest and storyline. It's another thing where you have to keep grinding and grinding and grinding, and hopefully you get the right sequence of dialogue to populate in the game so that the quest line keeps going. Now, one way to speed up this quest line is to actually wear Achilles' keepsake, which is just a special item that you get from Achilles in the hub world of the game. And while this item is equipped, you should speak to the NPC character in that 3rd region, who, again, may or may not appear during your run, so it becomes tedious once again. But that was the quickest way to actually progress the plotline. Mainly just wear that one keepsake that you get from Achilles and hope, that you get the NPC character to show up and then just talk to him over and over and over again until that specific dialogue triggers. But aside from this, everything else in the game is amazing. I just really wouldn't go for the platinum a second time. I wouldn't do it again. But I would play Hades any day. You name it, I would play it. I just would not go for the platinum again. Okay, next here is Enter the Gungeon. Yes, another roguelike here, and by far more tedious and difficult, for me at least, than Hades Platinum. There are far more trophies in Enter the Gungeon that were difficult and involved a lot of grinding, a lot of RNG, and that's kind of what made it a little bit less enjoyable than even the Hades Platinum. Weird Tale involves the player needing to farm certain enemies a ton of times over and over and over again if they even spawn during your run. And again, this would involve countless runs, hoping that you'll encounter the specific enemies that you need to kill in order to progress this side mission. And on top of that, similar to Hades actually, the Trick Shot trophy is another tedious and annoying trophy where you basically need to ace this specific type of minigame that is distributed by an NPC called Winchester, who again randomly appears on your runs. You may see where I'm going with this. You have to not only hope the NPC character spawns during your playthrough, but you have to also make sure to ace his minigame, which again just involves you shooting these moving targets without wasting any of your shots. It might sound pretty easy, but the layout of the minigame is completely randomized, so you may either get a super easy or a super hard one, and it's just a lot of RNG and a lot of just trial and error at this point. And that's what contributes to a lot of the playtime and a lot of the time that it takes to actually get the platinum. Do not get me wrong. Enter the Gungeon is a great game, it's an amazing roguelike, but the trophy list and the platinum itself can be pretty annoying and pretty challenging, and I definitely would not go for it a second time. Alrighty, next up here is Lake. Lake is an indie game that focuses on your main character getting away from the hustle and bustle of the big city life to deliver mail in a small town. It's very slice of life and definitely not what I was expecting it to be. The game initially drew me in with its great art style and beautiful setting, and if anything, this game succeeded in capturing a small town vibe, and by the end of the game, I kind of wanted to move to this town. However, even after an hour of playing, I was ready to move on to other games and put this one in the rearview mirror. This is not a hard platinum at all, but the gameplay loop just wore on me over time, and the act of driving around to characters that I, for the most part, didn't really care about made the game feel like a slog. Say what you will about Death Stranding, but I found that game to at least have a decent amount of lore and intrigue to kind of keep me going through the 80 or so hours that I spent with it. Granted, we're talking about two different games with drastically different budgets and scope, but still, Lake was not for me. Now, if anything I've mentioned has sounded interesting at all, then you'll probably like Lake quite a bit. It definitely succeeds in its art direction, its overall design, again, kind of achieving that small town vibe, but it just failed to get me invested in the game itself. Lake was just not the best experience for me, and the platinum was not hard at all, but I would not go for it again, just because, again, the amount of time I spent driving around, delivering packages, slowly walking around, mind you, to deliver these packages, it just wore on me. I didn't really find the gameplay super engaging, and so yeah, I probably just wouldn't go for the platinum again on this one. Okay, next up here is the original Killzone that I played on the PlayStation 3. I found the original Killzone to be super clunky and unenjoyable to play, and it was an overall unenjoyable experience. But I decided to go for the platinum trophy thinking it would be quick and easy. And while it was easy, I didn't anticipate how many times you'd actually have to complete the various story missions over and over and over again, which became trite and pretty boring very quickly. You do have to beat the game on the hardest difficulty, but it didn't really pose too much of a challenge because there are cheats and ways to sort of circumvent you having to kind of go through the challenges of beating the game on hard. But the main problem was that after you beat the game for the first time, you then have to beat certain chapters of the main story using certain characters. So in some cases, you'll play through the same chapters 2 to 3 to 4 times, and it gets super tedious really quickly. So for example, the main character you have to beat the story mode once with, and then his buddy Rico you have to beat missions 2 through 6 with, and then his other buddy Hackett you have to do 5 through 12. It's some random assortment, but you end up playing the same missions multiple times from different character perspectives. But since I found the core gameplay to just be clunky and unenjoyable to begin with, it was very tedious after a while to do the same thing over and over and over again, and I just didn't get any enjoyment out of it. Now, if the game had tight controls, or I had some sort of enjoyment while playing it, I probably wouldn't have cared too much, but man, it was a slog to get the platinum for me. I love Killzone 2, I think 3 is great, I even enjoy Shadowfall to some extent, but the original Killzone and its platinum, definitely not something I'd go for again. Alrighty, so we are at the last platinum here. This is New Tales from the Borderlands. Where do I begin with this one? I'll just preface things by saying I'm not a fan of Borderlands. I played the first one when it came out on Xbox, not the best. Then I played Borderlands 2, didn't think it was that great, but it was for sure a big improvement over the first game. And to date, I still think the best piece of Borderlands content has to be Telltale's Tales from the Borderlands game. It made someone who is not a Borderlands fan in the slightest excited about the characters and the world of Borderlands. I thought it was funny, well acted, overall just an incredibly memorable experience that still manages to just be right up there with all of Telltale's other great games such as Wolf Among Us and The Walking Dead. So I was excited to try out New Tales from the Borderlands, and oh my god, what a disaster this game was. The game is, I think, just unfunny, has painful dialogue, situations and conflict void of excitement or intrigue. I just didn't really vibe with this game at all. If I had to describe this game, it feels more like a Gearbox game as opposed to a Telltale game, which kind of makes sense considering, Telltale really didn't have a hand in creating this game. Mostly it was just Gearbox. But the biggest problem for me was everything great about Tales from the Borderlands was completely undone with this game. It just really ruined the original, not ruined it, but it took all the good aspects and it just undid everything good about that game. So why wouldn't I go for the platinum a second time? Well, I mean, the biggest thing is I didn't really like the game. But there were 2 trophies I found to be annoying that contributed to me having to replay the story 3 separate times. New business requires you to have a good skateboard rating by the end of the game, and that also kind of goes into getting one of the good endings of the game, but you constantly have to quit out of the game after you finish a chapter, check your score in the main menu, and hope by chapter 4 you have at least a score of around 70 to 80% in that range. Otherwise, you're better off just replaying chapter 3 until you get a higher skateboard rating. And I found this to be pretty obtuse, and when the game initially came out especially, there was no good documentation on how to easily get all the endings. It was very trial and error, very just kind of like experimentation based at that point. Now, shout out to the YouTube channel Ben Gunn for providing a pretty concise list of the endings in the game and, how to get them. And I'm going to post them now, so I will be spoiling the endings in just a second. But without this outline of the endings, I still needed to replay the game multiple times, and you really can't skip all the scenes in the game. You kind of just have to, again, like the Quarry, replay the same thing over and over and over again. And in this case, you're replaying sections that I thought were boring, cringe, or just poorly written at times and not very interesting to me personally. So it's for these reasons that I probably would not go for the Platinum again, and I think at this point, I'm just over Borderlands content, and if I do want to play any sort of Borderlands game, I'll just replay the original Tales from the Borderlands because that was such an incredible, tight, fun, funny experience through and through. Well, that is going to do it for today's video, everybody. If you did enjoy this content, please consider giving us a like down below, and I will see you all on the next video.